So good morning. My intention this morning is to walk you through an overview of preparation versus reality that we've experienced at Christchurch Airport managing the events of the last 18 months. Just to put a couple of things in perspective though, you'll be interested to know that Christchurch Airport is the largest centre of employment in the South Island. Around 5,500 people work on the campus out there. 300 of them plus work for CIAL on its own. Around 11 million people go through the airport terminal every year, 6 million passengers, 5 million meeters, greeters, farewellers and others. So roughly we see the city of Timaru, the equivalent of city of Timaru, come in our gate every day. It's a very busy place. Christchurch International Airport's actions had the airport open within a few hours of the September 2010 quake and open for emergency flights 1.5 hours after the February 22nd quake. I'm told that the airport's actions on February 22nd saved in the order of 25 to 30 lives. I'll tell you how that happened. It didn't happen by good luck, it was good management backed up by sound planning. In July 2010, CIAL ran a simulation exercise as a company-wide exercise to check the company's effectiveness to manage emergencies. The outcome was a number of changes from that which we utilised in September and again in February. Prior to July 2010, or to the exercise in July 2010, airport staff had assumed that an emergency would be aviation related, in other words, an aeroplane crash. A review of late 2009 suggested to us that our emergency menu might be wider than that. We hired an outside contractor to run the disaster exercise and spring it on us without warning. So it was a surprise at 6:10 a.m. on a July 2010 morning to receive a call to say that the Air New Zealand aeroplane painting facility at the airport was on fire and a full emergency had been declared. This was a simulation, I hasten to add. The airport management staff had been divided into two teams. The black team, who assisted the outside contractor with planning and enacting the disaster, and the white team had the task of coping with the disaster. On the morning, the black team constantly threw in additional challenges, such as telling us there was a fully fueled 737 in the hangar, landlines had failed, the fire took out the mobile phone repeater tower, and the internet had gone down. Thick toxic smoke had blanketed the airport and we had to close the runways, and that asbestos fibres from the old aircraft painting facility had entered the air handling system, requiring long-term closure of the domestic terminal. All that was on paper, but it was certainly very realistic. Our team came through the exercise quite well, but there were major learnings taken forward. Perhaps the biggest was the debunking of an assumption that we could rely on these things in an emergency. Absolutely useless. As a result of the pretend cell phone failure, we reintroduced good old-fashioned walkie-talkie two-way radios and ensured that all primary parties on the airport had them. Another cell phone learning was that in an emergency, all sorts of people ring you up to say, how are things? Cell phones are useful at later stages, but in the middle of an emergency, they are useless. One of the things we decided to do from this simulation was to issue key people with satellite phones. And believe it or not, the satellite phones were issued to us on the afternoon of Friday, 3rd September 2010. The very next day, we had our big earthquake. At our homes in the suburbs, the quake hit, things were pretty wild, so we expected the airport to be quite badly damaged. We were surprised to arrive at the airport and find things were pretty well normal, buildings standing, runways intact. At first light, we took a helicopter up to look at the airport. The contrast between the violent shaking at home and what we were seeing or not seeing at the airport was difficult to comprehend. This taught us that we couldn't assume that what was right in one part of town would be right for the airport. More on that later. Communications became interesting. As I said, we'd been issued with satellite phones. First learning from that is you have to stand outside to use the damn things. We had to learn how to use them. September also underscored the importance of two-way radios. After the September quake, we issued hard copies of staff lists Key staff members now have a set of those lists at home and in their cars permanently. We learned you can't rely solely on soft copies on computers. Hard copies don't get flat batteries when the power goes off. We revised our knowledge of and working relationship with each organisation under our control. By that I mean that many organisations on the airport campus come under our control in an emergency, but we needed to know what they could do and have at their disposal. September clearly showed us the need for leadership in an emergency. That might sound elementary, but we found each organisation had its own management structure and its own plan. There was a need for overarching control, which CIAL had to assume. To better understand the leadership role required of us, we carried out a number of debriefs. We shared with the team at the airport our learnings, our revised emergency plans, and importantly, how we assess and manage events. It might also sound obvious, but it's vital in an emergency to prioritise. In an emergency, everything can seem important. There must be a clear plan to stick with the really important issues. One of our problems was that we have lots of very important people who front up at the airport and require special treatment. It's very difficult to handle that situation at times. We learned a lot about our own staff in September, even more in February, and I can't say enough about the fabulous team I've got working for me at the airport. Even so, we were reminded that each staff member has a different capability. They react and respond differently, and they have individual and personal circumstances to cope with. We learned in September that you can't work staff longer than they can be effective. They need to be replaced and allowed to rest even if they think they should work longer. We realised after the September quake we needed an intimate knowledge of our assets. We now have detailed photographs of every part of every building on the campus. We learned about food. The Army well knows that troops aren't effective with empty stomachs. The same applied to us. In September, the people working on the EOC, Emergency Ops Centre, lived off the items in the fire service kitchen. In February, the guys evacuating the terminal gathered up all the food they could on the food court and brought it in. We now have a bigger store and a bigger kitchen at the EOC, which stood us in good stead during the snowstorms which came later and again on December the 23rd. One of the invaluable systems we've now established is the basis of our emergency response. It is the Coordinated Incident Management System known as CIMS, C-I-M-S. CIMS establishes roles required to manage the response of the situation and standardise what is required of those roles. The overriding incident action plan identifies phases, steps and actions which dictate the CIMS roles. Each of the positions established through CIMS comes with a position checklist. The CIMS system was implemented after September. Each of the management positions comes with an annotated high-vis jacket and a cell phone in the pocket. So at the end of a shift, the cell phone and the jacket are simply handed on to the next person to give continuity and clarity. We learned that the Emergency Ops Centre doesn't need to be fancy. In September, we operated with hardcover exercise books, some pens, a whiteboard and some radios. But most importantly, it needs an independent power source. In hindsight, we probably closed the EOC down too early in September. It ran for 18 hours when we thought the emergency was over. After February, we ran the EOC for 5 days. After the September shake, we added transport to our contingency plans. If people couldn't get to us, we'd get to them. By helicopter, by Hagelin from the Antarctic Centre, airport fire service vehicles or members of the four-wheel drive club. Very importantly, the contrasting experiences I described in the September quake when the impact at home was huge but the airport was untouched highlighted our need for a way to accurately assess how big an event was at the airport. After the September quake, we struggled to understand how to measure the effects of an earthquake. It became obvious that the Richter scale was useless. A 6 at Lyttelton might mean a lot there, but at the airport it might be very little. So we looked at ways to give us the information we needed. We settled for a start on the McKellie scale, which operates from 1 to 12, but we also wanted to overlay it with hard qualitative data. We installed accelegraphs on the airport. This is a gadget which measures the level of vertical and lateral acceleration. Data comes from various points around the airport and dictates the event being either an A or B or C, which then dictates the action we take. Category C is a small quake, Category B is middling. Yep, we check the buildings, we look around, make sure things are okay. Category A is the real McKelly 7 and above, and that requires us to close the airport and go through our emergency restart procedures. Let me now finish and give you an overview of what happened at the airport on February 22nd, 2011. It was 12:51 p.m. There was more than 1,000 people in the terminal. Flights were being checked in, food and coffee was being served, people were buying things in the shops. When the earthquake hit, airport staff focused on evacuating the terminal and providing a safe environment for the public. The airport was closed and key ops staff went to the emergency ops centre. Teams swung into action as they'd been trained to do to carefully check buildings and runways for damage. Within 90 minutes, the runways were open for civil defence and medical flights, which allowed rescue personnel and equipment to come into the city and the injured to be flown to hospitals and other centres. By 6 a.m. the morning after the quake, hundreds of people had gathered outside the terminal, all wanting to get on a flight out of town. At 8 a.m. we announced that commercial flights would resume during the morning, so literally thousands poured into the terminal. There was little hotel accommodation in the city, so around 400 to 500 people were sleeping on the floor in the international terminal each night for about a week after the emergency. Our resources were severely stretched to keep people safe and comfortable, and of course to provide a hygienic environment. The response from the airport staff, border agencies and airport businesses right across the campus was outstanding. Air traffic controllers stayed put in the control tower, 14 stories high. They tell us that the top of the control tower moved through 1 metre, half a metre one way, half a metre the other way. You can imagine what it was like sitting up there in that. They were incredibly busy diverting planes to other centres, handling emergency flights, military aircraft and numerous helicopters. Customs team went into the city to assist search and rescue, as well as the very difficult task of then coordinating with next of kin arrivals and departures. HMS Host, our primary food and beverage supplier, worked around the clock. They baked 4,000 muffins in 2 days. The underground coffee team made an average of 3 coffees a minute, 24 hours a day for 2 days. That is 8,500 cups of coffee. In a normal week, 120,000 people go through the terminal or travel, depart or arrive on aeroplanes. And the week after the quake, we handled 200,000. And in that time, the airport fire service, who respond to medical call-outs on the campus, attended an equivalent of 1 month's medical calls. A few months later, we had snow. You know, those two once in 40-year storms that you're supposed to have? We had 2 of them in 1 month, thank you. Lessons learned in September and refined in February stood us in good stead through the snow. The snowstorms were another reminder that no one can ever be too ready for an event. And in the snow, and again on December 23rd, we applied all our systems and learnings to the situation we found ourselves in. So in summary, I would say the biggest learning from every emergency is learning. It's vital to take staff forward after every event and to give them the opportunity to review the part that they played and how it worked and what feedback they can offer to refine the process for the next event. We've also learnt that the best assistance that we can provide based on our learnings is to share our learnings with others. Thank you.